I think it should be more of a conversation, not a talk, because we want to try and amplify, not try, we will amplify and try and gain some traction to the topic about developer relations for internal engineers. So that's what we'll be talking about today. Just a little story, because we are storytellers, right?
Yeah.
About where we got the name from. We have a tagline at work. Every time we share internal comms at work, we end with your friendly neighborhood developer advocacy. And for those of us who are Marvel superhero, part of the fan base, might ring a bell, right? But yeah, we decided to share that also, that we are also like friendly neighbors around there. Yeah, so let's join the conversation.
Okay, so that's me. I'm an internal developer advocate at Adyen. It's sort of like a unique role that we're doing. We've heard a lot about developer experience, developer relations, developer advocacy, but we've focused more on how we can help the customers. So in this talk, what we will do is we will sort of like reverse it and try to tell you how in your own company, you often have to think about your own employees as your customers as well, and that's where this internal developer advocacy comes in. Before joining Adyen, I was a senior software engineer. I was focusing more on cloud side, building serverless solutions for most of the fintech companies in different regions. In my part-time, I'm basically an author. I've written a book with Apress covering .NET. I've also produced a bunch of courses at Rural side. So when many people are sleeping, I'm teaching different people. So I think that sort of builds the persona, the profile of sort of like an advocate. So I think the best way to learn is by teaching someone. And while you're teaching someone, they often point out your mistakes. Like, hey, you made a bummer over there. And oh yeah, actually they're right. Maybe you didn't look into that. And while I was doing that, I was writing a lot of blog posts. I earned the MVP title from Microsoft. I've been an MVP with Code Project for almost like 6-7 years. Same with C# Corner. And quite recently, I was also awarded by Alibaba Cloud because they're one of the biggest leader in the cloud space in Asia. And I come from Asia, so it made sense. And after watching all the talks yesterday, I thought I should also put my Twitter tag. So please give some love over there as well. And Amy.
Yeah, like Afzal, I'm also an internal developer advocate at Adyen. Like most of us, I have a background in software engineering as an IC, and also I have some experience as a developer educator. I'm a self-proclaimed bike evangelist. I mean, look at that. And then you can also follow me on Twitter at Amy Strings. There we go. Oh, this is not working. So we would just go manually. We had like a whole barcode where you could, scan, and then we take some poll. But let's go the manual way. Yeah. So we'd ask a question. Like I said, we want it to be more of a conversation. We want to have some feel of what our audience, where you stand. So we'll start with a poll, and we'd like to ask the question: should internal developer advocacy or internal developer relations be a dedicated team in a tech organization? Now, I know that we have different categories of people here, so raise your hand if you believe it should be a dedicated team in a tech organization. I am hoping to see many people. Well, okay. So maybe
no spoilers. So
maybe I should do that, because like we had a whole slide with the whole options that we had. But so I think I'll run through the options we have. Yeah. If you believe so, we'll go through that. If you think it depends, we'll go through that. If you think, okay, I'm not convinced yet, we would also go through that. And then there are people who like to sleep on things. Like, okay, I want to sleep on it first of all before I make my decision. We'll have an option for you there. So let's start with, if you believe so, raise your hand, please. I think that's a good.
Yeah, that's a good count. Let's see how we can push that forward.
Yeah. So if you feel like it depends, and you can also raise your hand if you. Yeah. Oh, that's a larger one.
That's a larger one.
Okay, and then if you feel like you're not convinced, you've already heard about the role, and then you feel like, yeah, I'm not convinced yet. We are hoping that the talk would also convince you, but no shame, just just raise your hands if you. Wow, cool. We are in good company.
Yeah, indeed.
Nice. Okay, and then I know the rest of us might, are not decided yet and like to sleep on it, but we are hoping that also would cover that during the talk.
We would also share some of the learnings that we've had at Adyen, creating this role. Adyen has had developer experience for a couple of years now. The internal developer advocacy was formulated like a couple of years after the external developer advocacy because they saw the same challenges that the external developers had. The internal developers were also facing the same thing. So in this talk, what we will cover is the growth and experience from the company's perspective, not in terms of the product, but in terms of how your culture is shared with engineers with different backgrounds. And we will talk about Adyen's story of internal developer advocacy, the lessons that we learned, the pitfalls that we fell into over and over again, often because of the culture. And then we will talk about final notes about internal developer advocacy and why we think what we think about. That's something that will come at the end.
So I think there's something I would like to add for the Adyen story. There was a talk, Ben's talk, I think yesterday, he mentioned about having an origin story. So for our Adyen story, we'll basically be sharing the origin story of why the role was formed and some of the factors that contributed to getting into the role.
Yeah. So I think the first one is the growth of the company. These are just hypothetical numbers. We were trying to come up with more numbers, but then we had to mention certain names, or it would make a lot of sense about which company we're talking about. So we wanted to just keep this one general. So, for example, you're a startup, like it was mentioned in the last slide. You could be 6 people running a startup, right? But your culture is defined at that point. And most companies, that is definitely the case. When you just start working on something, you know what you want to do. You have your goal, like, for example, 5-year plan, 6-year plan, 10-year plans, and you're working on the same focus. You're trying to add value in the current ecosystem because, of course, if you're introducing a new social network, this will never be the first time introducing a social network. If you're building a more tangible thing like a delivery service, this will never be the first time building a new delivery service. So what is the thing that you're trying to do? But in that part, you don't have like sort of dedicated responsibilities. Often the backenders and frontenders are working together. They define the API contracts while they're having a coffee in the cafeteria. And that sort of shows most of the information is still with the people who are leading a lot of those areas. And then as you start to grow, you sort of like start defining the teams. These 5 people are focusing on the front end. They'll be building the pipeline scripts for our front end, how our application is built, how we maintain the security, regulation around that. And we also have people who are focusing on the back end. Now, what I've learned, not just in Adyen, but also while speaking with people from different companies of different sizes, is it's often considered that when you grow, only then, like larger enterprises with 2,000 people, they have their own on-prem system. They maintain their own data centers. That is actually not true. It could be the same company, the same startup with 6 people. They manage their own racks, for example. The startup doesn't have to be like a company that's handling trillions of messages every second. It could be anything, right? So that's something that we learned really early on, that the decision between on-prem or going to cloud is part of your culture. How you think about regulations, how you think about risk, compliance, ownership, all that part is part of your culture. You either like cloud or you don't, or maybe you either trust cloud or you don't trust the cloud. And then finally, we reach the enterprise stage. This enterprise the number can be different. It could be like 20,000 and you're still a scale-up. It could be 500 and you're an enterprise already. But what happens in these groups is that the hiring process is so fast. your teams can no longer onboard the engineers with the same efficiency that they were hiring 2 years ago, for example. And this is something that we've seen in a lot of companies. Many people had to come up with more scalable, more on-demand manner of onboarding people, while 5 years ago they were doing, for example, a chat with the team lead, and team lead was telling them, hey, you need to install these softwares, and once you do that, you're done. Another thing that we actually learned in the organizations that have their own infrastructure, their own data centers, is that the advocacy doesn't apply just for the developers. Although the name says internal developer advocacy, you have your own engineers, you have your hardware procurement teams, you have your staff that manages the networking. And if you're focusing more about the development side, if you're trying to push for getting web apps out of the infrastructure, you might push your infrastructure teams to their limits. And that's where they're like, hey, we know you're a developer advocate, but we're also part of your teams, right? So that's something is very important to understand when thinking about internal developer advocacy.
And then we'll share a little bit about how the role was formed, some of our origin story, some of the factors that contributed to why we have internal developer advocacy at Adyen right now.
Yeah. So first thing was, for example, if you're like 50 people company and you need a new tool, you can speak with your team lead, and maybe he will pay with his own credit card for your software, right? And he will then reimburse it. But as soon as that grows, then you need to define sort of like expert groups, like who manages the big data platform, who manages the tooling for Python, who manages the IDEs and the whole tool chain for C++, and that's where almost every scale-up when moving toward the enterprise, they need sort of like expert groups or communities where when the engineer is onboarded, they join those communities, they become part of it, and mostly those communities, whenever they're having a coffee, they're sharing a lot of notes with them that, in your first week, you're supposed to know all of this. In your first 2 days, you should have all of this software configured. And that leads to more team-specific onboardings. If I share about Adyen's story, Adyen is a Java-heavy company. For almost a decade, it was Java-focused. So we did have front-enders, we did have mobile people, we did have C++ for terminals, everything, and of course, we had the data center folks as well. But the focus was mainly on Java. So if you would read a lot about onboardings, if you would search on the internal documentation platform about onboarding or how do I get started with my laptop, you would read mostly about Java or things that are centric around Java. So how do we move that toward more team-specific onboardings? How do we enable teams to have more ownership over the onboardings, but at the same time be able to audit and review that all the onboardings are of good quality, especially if you're going to enable people from different backgrounds to switch. For example, people from tech support switching to Python or people from C++ switching to Java. Then you need to be able to tailor all those onboardings to the needs of the people.
Yeah, and then as a skill, there is, always the conversation about the tools we use, documentation we use, the tools we use, what frameworks we use, what processes, workflows, and they are sometimes very varied. Like Afzal mentioned, we have like different engineering groups. We have a Java group, we have the C++ groups, and so those conversations we had to, as we scaled, we had to start considering how do we, standardize this? How do we make for more consistency around these groups? How do we make that it's not just one individual? If you're a startup, it's like one individual. I like VS Code, for instance. Everybody gets to use VS Code. Or I like IntelliJ. Everybody gets to use IntelliJ. So we had that. That we started those conversations, and because of that, the responsibility for the role, started in that case. And then, lastly, we started to see a shift as we were scaling. We had a lot of engineers who had spent like 5 years. They had some historical context about our platform. They had spent so much time on the platform, and so they practically maybe had like a very old perspective on why we chose some tools, on why we did what we did at the beginning. And then we started to see that we needed to shift from having individuals who have like tribal knowledge to standard documentation. So if we want someone who is just joining newly to find something, we don't want them looking for someone. We want them going somewhere, to see, okay, this is where I can access this, without, chasing people around. So we started to see that shift from that tribal knowledge perspective to, okay, we have to standardize our documentation. And then we realized that it's more or less like a developer journey. From when the developer joins Adyen, so from onboarding to they pick up a tool they have to use to build our products and all. So every touch point for the developer on that spectrum of their journey, every touch point of of a developer is what we started to look for. We started to look at, to make a case for how we can make their experience more enabling, to make their experience more productive or effective. And then some of the things we do right now is, like every one of us know here, we build like content and communities, but how we do it at Adyen. So what we want to do here is to share on some of the things we do, some of the things, and we just pick like three broad parts of what we do at Adyen. One of the things we do is we organize internal knowledge sharing sessions, and then we also support them. Because we at scale, we started to notice that teams started to be like siloed, right? So you as a team member just know what's happening in your team. There's no like real visibility about what other teams are doing, and also we organize like internal knowledge sharing sessions. And what that looks like is, I know we organize like tech bites, for instance. Like we have lunch at Adyen where we have like engineers come to share about their experience. It could look like an engineer sharing about a book he or she had read or they had read, and sharing about the culture and how we can adopt it in the Adyen context. It could look like an engineer thinking about a tool that they are building and how they could automate some of our processes and share the proof of concept to the small group first of all before they push it out. It could also look like we also have like external guests. We have some developer advocates from other companies that technologies that we don't use at Adyen come around to share some of the insights about those technologies with our engineers internally. And then we also have feedback sessions. We take this very seriously because we like to like continuously have feedback from our engineers. We like to hear their experience. And like I said, the perspective from an engineer who just joined the company is quite different from the perspective from an engineer who has like stayed for 5 years and or more than. So we organize feedback sessions. Mostly we value the perspective from the new joiners because they bring in like a new, fresh perspective. They're able to see some gaps where we have missed out some gaps. They're able to point out, okay, this is a gap we think we need a better experience, onboarding and all. So we organize like feedback sessions continuously for our engineers. And the way I like to see it is, just like Abzal said, we call our development community engineers to be all-inclusive because we have like 2 categories. We have what we call the platform engineers, like engineers who build and maintain services for what the product engineers would use. Like you think of the database engineers, think of the cloud, monitoring, logging, and some data pipelines and all. We have that platform engineering group. And then we have the product engineers, the engineers who build our Adyen product. So there is almost like a gap. There's almost like a bridge between these 2 categories of engineers. So what we work on and what we are also pushing to work more on, we recently hired my colleague Dillion to specialize mainly on this focus. What we are pushing for is to make sure that gap is we can close it basically, but we push to make sure that there is a little to no gap between these two categories in terms of documentation, in terms of what they are producing in terms of documentation. It's also very consistent and standardized, the documentation that they produce there. And then we also work for advocacy for all engineering groups, right? Like Afzal said, Adyen is mainly a Java, primarily Java platform. So the majority of engineering groups in the company is Java. So when there are initiatives, it's very easy to just hop on the Java train. Okay, whatever the Java engineers like, we just go with, and then forget that we have front-enders, we have C++ engineers, we have Android engineers, and also as a team, we work to make sure that all engineering groups in whatever initiatives we are doing are included in the decision making for that.
Yeah, you can go back.
Okay.
No, you can go back.
Oh.
So I have 2 points to make. One, about the last part, about all engineering groups. It definitely differs for all the companies. You could be an iOS-heavy company with the front-end team just building your website, right? Just 3 people who are doing the website for you, but your main business, your main bread and butter is iOS, Swift, perhaps, right? So the main goal of all engineering groups is that you need to provide a more ergonomic development environment for everyone. So if you ask, for example, if you're an iOS-heavy company, if you ask them, hey, which tool should our technical writers use? The answers might be Xcode, but it's not true, right? So you need to ask for feedback from the groups themselves and be able to accommodate for them. And the second one about internal knowledge and sharing feedback session, that's something there where internal developer advocacy works with our external developer advocacy teams quite exclusively. We have a lot of questions internally that are answered by external experts. And it's a very little known fact, but Sebastian was at our head office and he talked about Kafka. He helped us answer a lot of questions about Kafka internally, and that's something that we really appreciate. And we do invite a lot of other experts to speak and to share their knowledge with us, or just learn or have a coffee, because we have a really good restaurant on the 11th floor in the Amsterdam Central. So if you're in Amsterdam, please do drop by.
Yeah. So I think I've given this out already, but we want to see if we. But I think we already have like a very good group from the poll. Yeah. We weren't expecting actually that many hands.
It was just 2 people with their hands down, but I think we need to keep the numbers a little bit real. 100% doesn't sound so real. But
yeah. So we thought that now that we've given you like a bite of what we do and what our origin story is, maybe you'll be more informed on making your decision for those of us who are not decided yet. So let's run through it again. Categories are, you believe it should be a dedicated team. You believe it should not. You're not convinced. And then you still have to sleep on it, because some people still take some time to make decisions. So let's go. If you believe that internal developer advocacy should be a dedicated team in tech organizations, can I see your hands up?
Oh,
okay.
That's a good one.
That's consistent, yeah?
Yeah,
we didn't really have like. If you still think it depends, let's see. Okay. Yeah. That's still consistent.
Tough crowd, huh? Tough crowd.
Okay, do we have anyone who is still in doubt, not convinced yet?
Maybe, no, you know what, based on the presentation, I would like to take my vote back. No, it doesn't have to be.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so I think, yeah, we are good to go. Yeah. We've made our points, and we'll continue the conversation, basically. Yeah.
So I think one of the most important thing is while we were working on focusing on a lot of initiatives internally, we learned it that what internal developer advocacy is doing is mostly helping your culture move forward. It's mostly about defining the culture, not the job description for your engineers. If, for example, we start saying like, hey, you know what, I think we need to support the tech brand, for example, for C++, or we need to highlight how our SDKs are developed or how our folks in the infrastructure are handling the database migrations, we need to write blog posts. That doesn't mean that every SQL engineer or every Python person has to write 2 blog posts every month. If they want to write it, we're here. But if they don't want to write it, They don't have to, because definitely whatever we do, whatever we're helping them with, is not something that's part of their job description. Their job description is different, and the culture description is more about enabling them. So I think internal developer advocacy is more about the enablement, enabling developers to be able to do what they want to do. So then I think we can just contrast these 2 points. So all the internal developers or the engineers, what they expect is faster onboarding from the team, especially if a company is like a decade old. All the decisions that were taken like 5 years ago, they have no idea about, or the people even left the company. So they need to know about why certain methods exist in a company. But at the same time, they also want the environment that they're used to of. For our side, for the internal developer advocacy, it's important to make sure that whatever services or products that you're providing, they're self-serviced. So it's not like you're becoming the bottleneck in the organization now. So before they had to speak with the management, they had to speak with their team leads, but now they have to speak with you, but you're too busy, and now it's delaying the overall business and the push for the value.
All right.
Yeah.
That's all we have. Concise talk. But we would like. Thank you. But like I said at the beginning, we would like it to be more a conversation. So I mean, I was joking with Afsal. I'm like, they give you the questions, they give me the suggestions anyway. But we would like your suggestions on what we've just talked about. So let's have a conversation basically on what we've just talked about.
Yeah.
Thank you. I would like to ask, for developers, did you include a gamification to encourage people to contribute in all these processes? The other side is the frustration of helping and not being recognized for that, or being stolen from that contribution by the superior, because it's hierarchical, and this happens very often in companies, that the superior takes all the benefits of the contributions of his team, and because the relationship is not like one-on-one or like not equivalent, they are afraid of talking about that. So this creates a toxic atmosphere in the company.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've seen is more about, especially in the public companies, is about the brand image. That's a challenge that we've seen, because I can only answer on behalf of Adyen. I'm not sure about how it works in other companies. For gamification, we do have rewarding. We do run internal hackathons, for example, and those hackathons help quite a lot. At this tech event, we had a hackathon, a proposal about menu for the entire week, because at Adyen we come 3 times in office, and for foodies like me, it would make sense to come to the office when the menu is good, right? So we're trying to just have fun, like just share what we know, what we build, and about the other part, what we do at Adyen is people just write up a blog about whatever they want to share. We can help them do the draft, and once they're ready, we for example ask the design team to do some sort of like mock-ups about sharing, because of course we cannot share a lot of internal information, and then once that's ready, we just put it with the person's name. So I definitely see that happens. It has happened with me as well in the past, but that's more Asian thing.
Yeah. So I think it's a cultural thing. Like so for Adyen, it's more every engineer is an advocate on their own. So there's a very flexible culture. Even the team leads and managers see that the individuals and teams have to gain recognition for whatever they are doing. There was a session we had. An engineer shared a tool. He taught a script to automate some of our flow. He built it. It wasn't a team initiative. It was his initiative. And right now, it's adopted in the whole company. And everybody knows that engineer did that, So I think it's a cultural thing. So for Adyen, and I think that's one of our drives also. We try to make sure that our engineers, they feel enabled enough to have that autonomy. I do my work, I'm recognized for the work I do, and I feel satisfied, at the work I do. Yeah,
And one thing that we did is to make it more personal. You can definitely have an Adyen hoodie or Adyen t-shirt, but you're less likely to have an Adyen hoodie with, for example, Node.js on it or with Python on it. But because you're working in that domain, we give you that thing so that you can remember exactly why you were given this. So I think that personal touch is very important when you're rewarding people.
I think we discussed yesterday how difficult it is to measure DevRel. I'm just curious, how do you measure internal advocacy? How do you know if you're successful?
I think Brendan put it really nicely. Don't do NPS. Anything but NPS. Like anything but like you never know. Like people can give you 9, but you were expecting 10. Are you not happy? So I think what we do is at Adyen we have a coffee culture. You can have a coffee with anyone. And I think that's more of like a culture thing to introduce new joiners to management. We have a very flat hierarchy in Adyen. So we sort of like repurpose that tool as sort of like a feedback. So when we're speaking with them, hey, how's it going? And then it starts. It's more like a therapy thing. So we're listening, is everything okay? Are your tools good? It doesn't go in that order, but like that's the gist of it. And then they start sharing, like everything is perfect, but this thing isn't working. So then we know, okay, so we need to collect this feedback, we take it to the team, and we see how we can prioritize it. And then we also see, is it just like what's the percentage of people that are impacted with this sort of like challenge? So we're more like talking to the people on the face. That's also part of Adyen's formula. Don't hide behind emails. Just pick up the phone. Just speak with the people.
Yeah, and about measurement, I mean, I think it's also controversial. We use OKRs, yeah. So I mean, you can't predict the future, right? You can't really say what would make an impact because things change, especially in our industry. It's ever changing. So we have like some guidance with our OKR, content, community, and all those, buzzwords. But we are more flexible in terms of we look for impact. We see as we go on what's more impactful, and we can go along that side. And then, yeah. So Adyen looks more on impact than following strict OKRs. You have to do this. You have to do this. You have to do that. But we do have those OKRs.
As promised, we'll take one third and final question, and then I'll say a few words afterwards.
Thank you ever so much. I'm just going to extend on that last question. I would be really curious to know, how do you measure impact internally? Because in theory, the impact of your work makes other teams more successful. But how do you 100%. Attribute that change in, the amount of success that other teams have back to your jobs? So like maybe how do you measure impact, or if you can share maybe what are the kind of basis for your OKRs, it'd be really interesting to know.
I think that's where most of our stuff is similar to what external developer advocacy is doing. For example, let's take a point about the build time for a Java program. Is it 15 minutes? Then we see what's the overall happiness of the engineer, and we see how we can improve it. Maybe they're okay with 5 minutes or 10 minutes, depending upon how it's built, dependencies, caching, and all that stuff. Maybe they don't want us to touch it, or maybe they want us to improve it. So then we speak with the teams and see how we can further improve it. So I think that our success actually depends on the developer's success. How happy are they in there? Are they happy with the tooling? Are they happy, or do they feel rewarded? Do they feel supported to be able to share what they're doing? Because that's something that engineers actually want. And since many people are having a background in startup culture or open source, they want to talk about how they improve the performance of database. So we need to support them. We need to enable them and sort of like build a pipeline where they don't have to come back to us again and again. Hey, this month I'm writing 2 blogs. This month no. We need to enable you. We need to tell you that we trust you to make the right decision.
Yeah, I can add a bit to that and give maybe a more practical use case for example, we have the drive to have engineers push for more like innovative ideas they have. So we can have a measurement to see how long the period has been for an engineer who comes up with an idea. The period between when they come up with an idea and when we are able to. We have something called Tech Radar. If any of us know about the Tech Radar and the phases of trial, assess, adopt, yeah. So we can also measure like how long did it take from that idea to its adoption. We can measure how, the process is basically for that. So those are the kind of things we look out for, yeah, to measure. It's hard. I mean, we all know, but yeah.
Measuring's hard.
Yeah.
We all agree.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then.